Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 196. Today, the Amateur Traveler goes to South America, to the tiny country of Uruguay.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into this week's interview, I have some news stories for you. An upscale resort in San Diego is cutting their price for their rooms, normally $219, to something cheaper, possibly something much, much cheaper if you decide you don't want beds or, say, a roof or toiletries. You can stay for as cheap as $19 a night, but bring your sleeping bags. JetBlue is also offering a sale, though I'm afraid you missed it for a while, ending today. They were offering $5.99 for an all-you-can-jet promotion that was a month of flying anywhere they flew from September 8th to October 8th, but it was so popular that they have stopped it. If in your will you know what you're going to do with the house and with the china, do you know what you're going to do with your frequent flyer miles? Did you even know you can give them to your heirs? I'd have to say I didn't, but there's an article about that, as well as links to other news items we talked about in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. And remember, if you're interested in learning more about travel news, check out This Week in Travel, which is another podcast that I am doing now with Jen Leo from the Los Angeles Times, Christopher Elliott from MSN and National Geographic Traveler, and Gary Arndt from just about everywhere. ThisWeekinTravel.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Lisa from Georgia, who's come to talk to us about, I'm going to say this wrong, and then we're going to correct it, Uruguay. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to talk to you.
And I say I'm going to say this wrong because you've just told me that I have been pronouncing this country wrong for some time. What is the name of this South American country?
Uruguay, or Uruguay, is more of an English pronunciation. But I didn't know it before I went there either, so don't worry.
Why did you go down to Uruguay?
There's a program in my school. I'm in veterinary school, so we have a certificate in international veterinary medicine in which you have to do an externship abroad for a certain amount of time. And we have a Uruguayan professor in my school, so a girl a couple years older than me had arranged an experience through her. It sounded great, so I wanted to do it too. I worked it out, and I had a great time down there, and I ended up going back for a second experience this summer.
So Uruguay is not a large country. You were in the countryside because you were doing veterinary medicine?
I was based in Montevideo, which is the capital and by far the largest city. About half the population lives there. But I was going out into the countryside to do spays and neuters and disease prevention programs.
Okay. What was the highlight for you other than the veterinary medicine?
It's just a really, really welcoming culture. Wherever I went, people just wanted to talk to me, show me off to their friends, invite me home for dinner. I just fit in right away. It was just an immediate homey kind of feeling. And I think because it is such a small country, they really don't get a lot of tourists. So they're always really happy when you come to visit them and want to show off their country to you.
What was the biggest surprise for you?
I guess it probably was just how easy it was to fit in. I mean, I've traveled even all around the U.S. and places, and I feel kind of weird, and I was just immediately fitting in there. It's a lot more rural than you would think. Maybe a second surprise, but they have a ton of just people riding horses down the street, or
down the street in the capital?
Horses pulling carriages. Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
I mean, you'll have all the cars and motorbikes going by, and then there's a ton of horse-drawn carts, which, especially with what I was doing, they're not usually in the best conditions, and there's some foundations trying to improve the welfare of the horses, so I was involved with that. But it's kind of weird. You'll just hear this clip-clop, clip-clop, but as you're sitting on the street and even around high-rise buildings and such. And as soon as you're outside of the capital, it looks like Nebraska. It's just plains and cows.
The other thing that I've heard people talk about Uruguay, and I'm going to say it both ways, because there's no way I'm going to correct myself, is that it's very European in style. Was that your experience?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Something people might not realize, they basically exterminated their native population with the original Spanish and Portuguese forces. So it's basically all Caucasian people. There's a very small African population, and like from slaves way back, and I think a little bit of Asian and recent immigrants. So it's pretty much everyone there's Caucasian, and it definitely is very European feeling at the city. It's all kind of either Art Deco style or kind of Soviet blocky looking houses.
Okay.
Depends on which part of the city you're in.
I think I'd like the Art Deco-y part of the city better. Where should I go when I'm in the city, for instance? Let's start with the capital. What should I see in the capital?
Right.
What should I not miss?
Definitely the biggest draw is the Ciudad Vieja, the old city. There's the Plaza de Independencia, which is Independence Plaza. It has the mausoleum of Artigas, who is their national hero. There's a big statue to him. You can go in around for the tomb. Then it has the original gate of the city is still standing. The rest of the wall is not there, but you can walk through the gate and go through the old city part. There's a lot of just cafes, ice cream shops there, tons of little street vendors. So those are definitely the big tourist draws. Right now, for some reason, they have this teddy bear exposition in the Plaza de Independencia. So it's like this big national hero thing with teddy bears all around it. It's very strange, but it was fun. Definitely you have to go there for the first time visit. There's also the Rambla, which is I don't know how many miles long, but just a big pedestrian walk alongside the riverfront. Okay. And it's really pretty. You can just walk around. There's some parts you're across from houses, restaurants, buildings. Sometimes there's just beaches and more natural scenery there. Sometimes if I didn't really have anything to do, I would just walk and do a couple mile stretch of the Rambla just to see what was out there and get outside.
And do the people in the city, like their European counterparts, do the evening stroll, the pasegiato, or whatever the Spanish version of that is?
Yeah, it's pretty popular. You'll see a lot of, or like on Sundays, people out there with their dogs or little kids walking, and it's common for the natives as well.
Okay. What else should we see? Culturally, what's a highlight, for instance?
It might be a little harder if you're just going as a traveler, but I feel if you just say hello to somebody on the street and say you're from such and such place, they'll probably get an invitation to their house or their birthday party or something. Mate is this sort of tea drink that's really popular there, and as well as Argentina and Paraguay. But it's just ubiquitous. Everybody going down the street has their little thermos and their this special gourd in which they put the mate. Sometimes they have these little carriers, and I thought people were carrying around binoculars because they were really interested in bird watching or something, but that wasn't true. And it's a really communal thing, so if you're at any kind of meeting or anything you have like 2 or more Uruguayans together, they're probably going to be drinking mate, and they just pass it around the gourd to share. If you find them with them, just drink some mate, eat some bizcochos, they're little pastries. That would be a very Uruguayan experience.
And mate is just an herb tea. Basically, it's tea, but made with a different plant. Okay.
Right. It's pretty bitter. It's definitely an acquired taste. I was more doing it just to be nice to the Uruguayans. I didn't really like it that much.
I think I've had somebody brought in some to where I work. What did you like? What in terms of food, as long as we're briefly going into there?
There's a ton. Full disclosure, they flip-flop with Argentina being the number 1 or number 2 beef eating per capita country, and I'm a vegetarian.
You're a vegetarian, okay.
So I missed out on a lot of that. And they also, like, even in the cookies and crackers, they use beef fat. If you're really careful about being vegetarian, you're going to have to check on that. Otherwise, because there's a ton of Italian immigrants as well, so there's pizza and pasta everywhere. Really good, really cheap. So I ate a lot of that. They have gnocchis, the little potato pasta things. That's actually a really traditional Uruguayan thing to eat. They eat it on the 29th of every month. I think it came from, like, it used to when people get paid at the end of the month and they needed something cheap at the end. So they would eat gnocchis. And the pizza there is pretty different. If you just get a default pizza, it only has the crust and tomato sauce. You have to ask for it with mozzarella. If you want cheese on it, it's kind of thick, more like focaccia bread to me.
Okay.
But it's good. And they always serve it in little squares. It's not usually round and wedge-shaped pieces.
Okay.
There's dulce de leche, the caramel stuff. It's everywhere. Like, every dessert will somehow have dulce de leche in it, I swear. The ice creams will have dulce de leche swirls, and there's so many cakes that have dulce de leche. Some people just spread dulce de leche on bread. It's really tasty and everywhere. So I was there in the winter, or late fall to winter, so there really wasn't that much produce out. And because it is temperate climate, there's not going to be any kind of tropical fruits or anything you might think about if of a Latin American country. Pretty much would just give me apples and oranges that were picked from who knows where if I wanted fruit. And there's a lot of kind of vegetable pies, and my friends' moms were cooking for me, and they were terrified of what to feed a vegetarian. But so they would make me lots of, it's kind of more like Mediterranean vegetable pies with spinach or leeks and stuff. There's a lot of that. Okay. There's some things that are, you think of more of Latin American, empanadas, churros.
Sure.
Those are there as well. If you do eat meat, of course, there's a lot of beef in all forms. It's supposed to be very good. More just typical going out thing are chivitos, which are these massive sandwiches. They have a breaded meat cutlet, and then with ham, bacon, cheese, usually a fried egg, and serve with either French fries or salad, because the salad is going to make up for all the friedness. But so those are really common, and usually they come in like platters for 2 when people go out. They also have a really big wine industry. It's not as well known, but it's similar to Argentina or Chile.
Interesting. As you headed down there, I assume you did some research ahead of time. What did the guidebooks recommend that you thought was a waste of time?
In the capital, there's the Puerto del Mercado, which is, it just seems really touristy to me. I mean, there's an outdoor market and lots of little restaurants, but you can get exactly the same stuff for a third of the price if you walk over 2 blocks. It really didn't have any kind of special cultural feel to it that I thought you couldn't get elsewhere in the city. Are
we walking in any particular direction 2 blocks?
No, not really.
Just as long as you walk away from there.
Right. It's just that is typed so much of where you have to go, but I really didn't think it was that interesting.
Okay.
And you should say, there really isn't an awful lot of information about Uruguay out there. You're really hard-pressed to find a guidebook. I think Lonely Planet just put out one, but it's just one of their special guides that's compiled from the chapters in the back of Argentina books.
Okay.
And that's pretty much all you're going to get of a guidebook of Uruguay. You might try to look online about things. It's not really the big tourist destination. You're going to find stuff all over.
Okay. So when you write your Uruguay guidebook, what are you going to definitely include because people don't know about it who come down there?
Meet people is the biggest thing.
Okay.
The second, get out in the countryside. It's pretty easy. There's buses and such. It has a pretty rural background.
Okay.
Montevideo can be pretty, but it has a lot of ugly urbanness as well.
Is there any place in the countryside you would recommend?
I think the one that would have the most resources is Tacuarembo, which is sort of northwest. That's real gaucho countryside. I think it does have a lot of, it's not dude ranch, but that's the best way I can think of it to more established tourism. There's Mercesdes, which is in the southern part, but all the way west on the Rio Negro. It has a really nice city courtyard place, and another rambla along the river. Colonia and Punta del Este are probably the two biggest tourist places. I actually never made it out to Punta del Este, which is beachside, and I was only there in the winter when it was cold and wet and yucky. But I know that's the playground for the rich and famous and very glamorous thing.
And that's nice. Looking over the water towards Buenos Aires?
No, that is actually on the Atlantic. It's a little peninsula. Colonia is on the Rio de la Plata, which is looking over Buenos Aires. You can see the lights of Buenos Aires at night.
Okay.
There's a lot of people who be in Buenos Aires, and then it's just a
side trip.
Hour-and-a-half ferry ride to Colonia. It's really nice. It's similar, but that's just a small city, very laid back. That's another old city. There's a lighthouse you can go up and see, get a good view. Of course, it has its own rambla. They really like having ramblas on the waterfront there. There's just a lot of little restaurants and cafes to go to. There's some museums from the old site. Colonia was actually settled by the Portuguese. It was supposed to be their port on the Rio de la Plata against the Spanish, but you can see who won out. But it has a lot of little character. One restaurant has these old cars on the street, and one of them has a table inside, one of them has a tree growing inside. And it's nice. There's the Calle de los Suspiros, which is, I guess, the oldest street there, and it's cobblestone, very steep, and has all the old little adobe houses. They're just really pretty. Everyone has to get their picture taken there.
What are the people from Uruguay most proud of? If you go there, they say, well, you have to see this because that's the best we have.
They do like their countryside. They seem very proud of how beautiful it is and their traditions. It seems to be the heart of Uruguay.
Okay. What's one warning you would give about someone going there?
It's still pretty safe for Latin America. A lot of Latin American capital cities are not that good. Montevideo is not too bad. It does have a growing crime rate from what I've been told. I never had any problem, but you should definitely make sure you're careful and know where your valuables are. Maybe take taxis at night.
And is taxis a good way to get around, or how are you getting around in general?
I was mostly taking buses. Late at night, if I had to go somewhere far out, I took taxis, and they're pretty cheap. The taxi drivers are very honest. They're not going to try to cheat you. If you want to do that, it's not a problem at all.
Okay. Who's the most memorable person you met? You talked about meeting the people.
Right. I think it was one of the women I was staying with. She was the secretary of this animal protection group, and she just went everywhere, was always busy finding new dogs and cats and getting homes for them. And she was actually a Uruguayan vegetarian, which is pretty rare. And she was just someone I really admired, and if I could be like her one day, I'd be very pleased with myself.
Okay. You talked about really encouraging people to meet people. Any secrets in Uruguay, particular, different from what we would use everywhere else? So when you go to Turkey, you have to know how to play backgammon. When you go to Uruguay, how do you meet people? What's the real trick?
I think saying hello.
That doesn't seem like much of a trick.
No. It was just amazing. Everyone was so friendly, and I would just go into a bakery and they'd be like, oh, where are you from? Oh, what do you think about Uruguay? And all. There is something which is probably a little bit easier, especially from the U.S. I imagine if any kind of English speaker, they wouldn't mind. They have a Alianza Cultural Uruguay Estados Unidos, so the Uruguayan U.S. Cultural Alliance.
Okay.
And they have English language weekly chats.
Oh,
so I think that would be a really great place for people to go and meet some locals. And these are obviously people who are interested in talking to foreigners. Actually, the girl that I was staying with mostly, she had originally learned English from that.
Oh, excellent.
And they also have one of those from the French government. So if there's native French speakers listening to this, they could also try that.
Excellent. Now, I'm gathering you were getting by predominantly in Spanish.
Yeah.
And is that generally it's helpful to have Spanish, or it'd be real easy in English?
It's definitely helpful.
Okay.
But most of the educated population, they have a great education system there, so most people are educated.
Okay.
Do learn some amount of English.
Okay.
How well they actually speak is...
So easy to get by in English, harder to converse.
Yeah, there'll be somebody around who can speak basic English at least.
Okay.
Of course, the farther you go from the big city, it might be harder.
Mm-hmm. But
especially if you're in Montevideo, Colonia, or Punta del Este, there's definitely going to be some English speakers around. Okay. And one thing with the language, even if you do speak Spanish well, they have a little bit of a different pronunciation there. Anything that's a Y or a double L, which is a Y in normal Spanish, They pronounce like sh or j, depending exactly on the word. So you have to get used to that. Like, if you have the horse is in the street, maybe el caballo está en la calle in most Spanish, but there's el caballo está en la calle. So,
okay.
And they also use a different tu, which is the informal u. They don't use. They use vos, and it has a different conjugation.
Great.
But they understand the tu form.
Okay.
I think they learn it in school, but nobody ever actually uses it outside.
Interesting.
So if you say tu, everyone will understand you, but they might be speaking to you in this totally different conjugation. So you're like, I know sort of what you're saying, but what exactly is going on? But they're used to it. If you give them a blank stare for too long, then they'll probably try to reword it.
As you talk about it, it seems like it was very familiar, very comfortable. Was there a moment you can think of where you realized there was something that was very foreign?
Well, everything is much smaller. The cars are usually very old. It's riding around on motorbikes sometimes, which is when you're zipping through the street on a motorcycle is kind of weird for me. If you go anywhere in the countryside, it is a little bit different. There was more poverty.
Okay. What's your best money-saving tip?
Figure out where there's a lot of locals. Eat there. Don't eat anything that's widely touting of its English menu.
That's a great tip in general. Any specific tips to Uruguay?
Not really.
Okay. As we go to wrap this up, one thing you should remember to pack before you go to Uruguay.
A scarf.
Okay, you were there in the winter.
Yeah. It's kind of cold and windy there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you really know you're in Uruguay when what?
You're sitting around with friends, drinking mate and eating bizcochos, and you have 10 motos, one big bus, and then a horse cart all going by you.
Okay. And if you had to summarize Uruguay in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Welcoming.
Okay.
Tranquilo, or calm, and modest.
Modest. Interesting. Why modest?
They're great people, but they always feel like they're a little inferior to Argentina or something. And they're just always talking about what they're such a small country and they don't have that much. And I was always like, no, it's just beautiful. I love it here. And they always wanted to know why I was coming to their little country.
Interesting. Lisa, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing with us your travels to Uruguay.
Thanks for having me.
I have one internet resource for you today. You know that I've been mentioning Twitter, which is where you can find information about all sorts of things that I'm doing and new articles that are published and that sort of things. If you're interested in other travel writers or travel bloggers, you might check out wanderlisting.com, which lists people in the travel industry who are also on Twitter. wanderlisting.com. In news from the community, most of the feedback that I get from you all on various shows is positive, although we certainly get some of our facts wrong sometimes. I would have to say that not all of them, though. The recent posting I got, a comment left on the board, is about the Traveling to India as a Woman, episode 160. Misinformation, astoundingly off. Wonder if she actually even went there. To refer to a sprawling city of 500,000 as one of the most famous royal cities in India as a lakeside village, to act as if she was the first American to go to Rajasthan, the longest holdout from the British rule, the fiercest warriors in northern India as a western province, is so appallingly naive that she got a book published after her 3 visits is astounding. That the interviewer didn't call her on her shallow knowledge is unforgivable. Well, I would be the interviewer there, and certainly my knowledge of India is secondhand, so I certainly might have missed things that I should have. I do happen to know, though, that Beth has been to India, but certainly no 2 travelers are going to see a destination the same, and certainly a traveler and a native may not see things the same way, and that's simply going to happen. Robert, on the other hand, left a comment about a recent show and managed not to use the word unforgivable. He said, I've been doing some boring, repetitive work here in the last week and listening to your podcasts at the same time. It really helps. Similarly, Erica managed to leave a comment on the board without using the word misinformation. She said, what an interesting and enlightening episode. This is talking about the Work and Travel Around the World, episode 194. While traveling in Croatia last year, I met a couple of kids teaching English for a semester in a small French town. It was interesting to hear how an experienced person created her own path. Since international traveling is becoming more expensive, you may want to continue focusing on U.S. destinations or uncommon U.S. destinations. Thanks for your effort. And Erica, thanks for your comment. I'm still planning on mixing up somewhat, doing some destinations that are domestic, some that are international. I would say my biggest problem with U.S. destinations is I'm getting pitched fewer of them. So if you know of a really good destination in the U.S., and think of something that should take at least a long weekend, so not a particular zoo or museum, but a city or a region or a larger national park or something, feel free to drop me an email or leave a comment, just like Erica did here. And I know that there are destinations that I'd love to cover that I haven't found the right guest for. With that, we'll bring this episode of The Amateur Traveler to a close, and I hope you'll get in touch with me and leave a comment, either an email at host@amateurtraveler.com or in a comment on the board. Tell me what you like and tell me what you don't like. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
Got to see one more cathedral.